is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Sunday in November to break down the Ravens' 27-19 win over the Minnesota Vikings. Ravens defense coming up big, forcing 3 takeaways in this game. We'll talk about a so-so offensive performance, some good, some bad, but they still were able to manage 27 points in this one. And then we'll take a look at the all-important playoff picture. All that and much, much more. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsors.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time. All right, thanks to everybody who's tuning in live on Facebook, YouTube, X, and Instagram. Jonas is in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am back in Baltimore. We're going to break down this win. Jonas, to me, the biggest takeaway was the takeaways. The Ravens defense comes up with 3 important takeaways, one of them actually by special teams. Malachi Starks with his second interception of his NFL career. Marlon Humphrey with a great interception downfield covering Justin Jefferson, and the undrafted free agent rookie Keandre Jackson with a forced fumble and recovery on a kickoff. And Jonas, this wasn't a perfect game played by the Ravens on offense or on defense, particularly on offense. But this just goes to show how important takeaways are, how important turnovers are, because they cover up for so many imperfections.
And just how random they are.
Hold up. False start. Calling a false start here. That's going to back you up 5 yards, Jonas. I had to do that because somebody.
That's the second time in a couple of weeks that I've been interrupted mid-speech.
What's the other one?
The time we had the podcast and then someone walked in the room.
That did happen. That's going to back you up 5 yards. That's your first of the day. That is, one of many on this day. 8 false starts committed by the Vikings in this game. Somebody tweeted at us, at Paul Mancano, at Jonas_Shaffer, that we had to start with a false start bit. So Ravens got ridiculously lucky with those false starts. 13 penalties for the Vikings in this game for over 100 yards, and 8 of them were false starts. We came in talking about the crowd noise being a problem for the Ravens and why they were blasting it back at practice. Turns out the Vikings, the home team, had more issues with the crowd noise. But anyway, I'll let you go.
Yeah, did it get to a point for you where you were just laughing at the absurdity as it comes higher and higher? It was just like, it's not in his prime Bruce Smith across from you. It's Kyle Hamilton. It's Roquan Smith. It's Brent Urban. It's, Travis Jones. It's Kyle Van Noy playing his 55th snap of the game. Like, why are you jumping early? There's so little to be concerned about, but I guess it just kind of goes to show how much continuity matters along the offensive line. I know the Ravens have not exactly had a banner year for offensive line play, but at least they had the good fortune of these guys staying relatively healthy and being able to play and get time on task with their quarterback in practice, all that kind of stuff. Not the case with Minnesota. They spent a lot of money on that offensive line and, had some nice flashes today. But they shot themselves time in the foot with turnovers, with penalties, with bad situational execution, with throwing away advantageous spots to chuck it deep. Like, the Marlon Humphrey pick comes on a play where it's 2nd and 1, 3rd and 1, and they just throw a deep shot, and it's just not a good throw, not a good idea. The takeaways doesn't even account for the 3 4th down stops, which are as good as turnovers, sometimes even better, because you're getting them, oftentimes in better field position than if you just got an interception 15 yards downfield. So the Ravens, again, not really a bend but don't break kind of day, because I think for the most part they kind of had their way with this Vikings offense aside from that opening drive. But if you just get this level of performance, if you get Lamar doing what he did to stay ahead of the chains, not, cut this team off at the knees. Obviously, special teams came through in key spots other than that one Tyler Luke field goal, that one Tyler Luke missed field goal. And, was it pretty? No, but I think considering what this Vikings team did last week against the Lions team that we're all really, really impressed by, to do it on the road and to be up by 14 points in that fourth quarter and should have won by 14 points if Marlon Humphrey, had just got JJ McCarthy down to the ground on that would-be sack, then I think people will probably feel a lot better about this. But a win is a win. You can't quibble with how you get at this point. You need to get to 4-5. 4-5 sure sounds a whole hell of a lot better than 3-6.
It does. And I think Ravens fans are probably just happy to not be on the wrong end of all of these self-inflicted wounds, because that was the story.
There are a lot of Ravens fans who are not happy with this win.
No, absolutely. But if they can be satisfied with anything, I mean, that's the Ravens for the first 6 weeks of the season. Large reason why they started 1-5 was they continually shot themselves in the foot, and they weren't doing stuff like forcing turnovers and forcing takeaways and creating their own luck that way. But the ball also didn't bounce their way. Now the ball is bouncing their way to an absurd degree. I mean, the Ravens also fumbled 3 times in this game, and they didn't lose a single one of those fumbles. So all of the little things are going the Ravens' way, and I think it points to the fact that the Ravens, as we've said, are an immensely talented team. The talent it obviously bore itself out in that win over the Dolphins, that dominant 28-6 win, and it bore out again today. I think the Ravens are the more talented team. They obviously have the better quarterback. They have amazingly the better offensive line. This is one of those few playoff contenders that I think the Ravens have the better offensive line than. And the Ravens, in a lot of ways in this game, created their own luck. And it's still despite the fact that I don't think we've seen a full 4-quarter game from the offense. I don't think we've seen this offense at their full potential yet. They still have hiccups. They still have a lot of bumps in the road, and yet they're still able to score 27 points on the road against a pretty good Minnesota defense.
Yeah, and I think Kyle Hamilton said it best post-game, like it feels like they haven't really put together a complete game yet where it's A+ offense, A+ defense, A+ special teams. It's just been a lot of complementary enough football that has gotten to this point. And it was kind of a weird vibe post-game, just reveling in the fact that you did come to Minnesota, leave Minnesota with a win, but for the fact that you are also 4-5. And the cognitive dissonance of this team, again, taking another step to being in a pretty good but not great playoff spot. I think they're on the New York Times, I believe their playoff odds are probably up over 60% or close to it right then. And yet it doesn't really square with how a 4-5 team should be feeling at this point. And certainly not a Ravens team that came into this year with Super Bowl expectations. So, obviously it's a weird spot to be in, just reckoning with where this team is, what it's lost, what it's gained, its limitations, which are pretty obvious in certain respects. But again, they're probably going to be, 8, 9, maybe 10-point favorites going into that game next week against Cleveland. You're probably looking at a very likely 4-game winning streak, a very likely 3-game road winning streak. I didn't think this team had very, very good odds of making the playoffs when we did our kind of 1/3 of the way check-in. I think I gave them 10% playoff odds, and they're making me and a lot of other people eat their bad words right now, because obviously, knock on wood, they seem like they are trending to be in a spot where they are going to be much further from the bubble than I and others expected them to be.
Yeah, we'll take a look at their playoff road, the road to potentially being the 6th team ever to start 1-5 and make the postseason. But this was a must win because of how much easier things get after this game. Jonas, let's start with the Ravens offense before we get to the fun stuff on defense. It was an up and down game, I think you could say, from the offense. I think you could say the good was that second drive in the first half, 11 plays, 42 yards, over 5 minutes. They come down, they kick the field goal. That looked like everybody's getting involved. Everybody's touching the football. Looked great. That drive before halftime that was super efficient, took less than 30 seconds, 4 plays, 63 yards to come right down the field and set them up for another field goal. They didn't have any turnovers. I think Lamar was steady, if unspectacular, in this one. And then I think there was some good creative play calling too. The fake tush push that Mark Andrews took the snap on and flipped it to Lamar Jackson on a key conversion in Vikings territory. I thought that they were able to handle the blitzes that they saw from Brian Flores and this Vikings defense. Lamar was getting the ball out pretty quickly for the most part. I thought all of that was good. But the bad was certainly still there. I mean, 6 of their drives, they failed to get a first down on. They went 6 for 15 on third down. And there were a couple opportunities at the end of the game where they have an opportunity to really put their foot on the gas and put this game away, where they're up multiple scores the first time and then 8 points the second time. And those 2 drives, they total just 9 plays. They punt the ball twice, and they take less than 3 minutes off the clock in those situations, despite having Derrick Henry in the backfield. So I think there was a lot of good, and there was just as much bad in this game, but it just goes to show 27 points. You take that every single time in the NFL. That's above their season average. It just didn't feel like a complete game from them.
Yeah, you look at their success rate, 49% overall, which is pretty dang good, but it seemed like a lot of that was accumulated on those drives where it was basically one successful play after another, and diminished by those drives where it was a 3 and out or was a 4 and out, and not a whole lot was happening. I think probably the biggest variable in this game that we talked about in the preview pod on Thursday was just what was Brian Flores' plan going to be for Lamar Jackson. And as it turned out, it was a lot of blitzes. It wasn't as much cover zero as 4 years ago in Miami. But I think you got a sense from Lamar, or at least I did, just watching this, like he understood that he was probably better off being a caretaker than a playmaker in this one. Not that he didn't put on that playmaker cape a couple times and do the crazy Lamar stuff that we've all become accustomed to. But like you look at his average depth of target in this one, 4.1 yards per throw. That's one of the lowest, average depths of target of his entire career. And I think that was him wanting to get the ball out quick. It wasn't even like they were throwing a whole lot of screens that, the kind of Bo Nix style of offense where you're just, chucking the ball horizontally to get rid of the ball or to put it in space or to give you guys a chance. It was just like him throwing short of the sticks a bunch of times on first and second down, but also on third down as well. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. There were a couple 4th and 2s where the Ravens sent their punt team on and they just didn't want to kind of risk it with their short yardage running game being what it is. So it's really tough for me to decipher what exactly to make of this Vikings defense, because again, it got blown off the field against the Chargers a couple weeks ago, especially by that Chargers running game. And here the Ravens were kind of hit and miss. I mean, only 75 yards for Derrick Henry, 3.8 yards per carry. Keith Mitchell, obviously a nice change of pace with his 31 yards on just 4 carries. But we didn't really see, the kind of step forward that I think we did start to see at around this time last year, where you really saw Lilly round into, probably the best version of himself that he's been when, Roger Rosengarten leveled up, when Ronnie Stanley was still healthy at that point. So, for Lamar to be a winner somewhat comfortably with only 0.06 EPA per play, it is just kind of a game where you tip your cap to the defense, you tip your cap to the special teams, you certainly tip your cap to JJ McCarthy and all the cock-ups that he had out there. But this was just a game where, I don't know. It's probably okay to feel not great about it, because we know just what this offense is capable of when it does have all systems going. But it's just been a while since we've seen a game where even 3 quarters have felt like all systems are going.
Yeah, this was not an MVP game from Lamar Jackson. 17 of 29, 176 through the air, 1 passing touchdown. On the ground, he had 9 carries for 36 yards. You mentioned Derrick Henry, those 75 rushing yards on 20 carries. He was not able to break one all game. They gave him a heavy dosage of carries, especially in the second half, and that's when you were starting to see Derrick Henry pick up the usual chunk yardage that we're used to seeing him get in the second half. But he didn't have one great breakaway run that was able to salt the game away. And that's part of the reason those 2 possessions at the end of the game made things a little bit too close for comfort. But I think we're just going to start to see the fully operational Death Star. We better start to see the fully operational Death Star the next 2 weeks, I should say, against the Browns and the Jets. Those should
still have a decent defense.
Yeah, but those should still be, steady production games for Lamar Jackson.
Although I'm now seeing that the Jets scored 27 points against them today. So maybe I should have taken that back. Yeah. Justin Fields, 6 for 11 for 54 yards, and no one with more than 83 yards for that Jets rushing attack. So I have no clue how they scored 27 points. They had 169 total yards and they scored 27 points.
Wow.
Okay, kickoff return for a touchdown, punt return for a touchdown.
Special teams, baby.
Jesus Christ.
They matter. How about the special teams for the Ravens today, by the way? Keandre Jackson, the undrafted rookie from Illinois State. We came into this season talking about the 2 undrafted free agent rookies that made this team. Keandre Jackson was not one of those, but he earned it over the last month. He did not make the initial 53-man roster. He was cut on August 26th, didn't get claimed, got signed to the practice squad one day later, and he's steadily been improving on special teams and making his mark. He forced a fumble in this game when the Ravens just had a 12-10 lead. They couldn't get much going on offense other than the leg of Tyler Loop. He forces that fumble, recovers it as well, and does what is now his signature backflip. Keandre Jackson is becoming a fun storyline for this Ravens team.
If he was doing this in college, I hope he got like a sweet NIL deal for being the backflip guy. But who knows if he was making as many plays as he's been making in Baltimore.
Yeah, for the Redbirds,
obviously,
of Illinois State. Didn't know the mascot.
He had a standout game against Miami in that he made a couple tackles, but he also, I think he had 2 defensive holding penalties, I believe, on punts or punt returns. So, mixing some of the good with the bad. But for him to, by the slimmest of margins, punch that ball out, and the Ravens almost got a second fumble recovery on just the very next Vikings kickoff return.
Yeah,
obviously it was Keandre Jackson in on that one, but this has been a steadily and much improved Ravens special teams group. I don't think they came into this game with top 10 DVOA, which is obviously until last year their usual perch under John Harbaugh, but they've done enough to not cost themselves as blatantly as they did last season. So, Jordan Stout had some really good punts, had 1 or 2 kind of iffy ones. Tyler Loop flirted with a really bad miss and then had a understandable miss where he missed from 56 yards, I think it was. So not a perfect outing, but anytime you can contribute to the turnover deficit like that, give your offense a short field, give the special teams a lift, on a cut rate contract that you're basically you can lock him into this roster barring injury for the next 2 years. These are the kind of margins that the Ravens need to work with just as a team building philosophy in general. You need to find the Keandre Jacksons of the world. You don't have to spend $2 to $3 million on a guy to come patch up your special teams. Not to say that Jake Hummel will or won't be back in Baltimore next year, but if you can spend half the money that it takes to sign a Jake Hummel on a Keandre Jackson, then you would absolutely do that 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10.
For sure. Let's talk about the defense, Jonas, and how they did against J.J. McCarthy. Our Who's Got It Better Than award this week, Jonas, goes to you and I for being vindicated about our takes about J.J. McCarthy, Mr. Rock in the Suburbs, Mr. 9. We will not, I don't think, have Vikings fans bombing our comment section on YouTube, commenting the number 9 and calling us stupid for roasting J.J. McCarthy, because quite frankly, Jonas, in this game, he was not impressive to me. 20 of 42 for 248 yards. He racked up a whole lot of yardage, a lot more than Lamar Jackson did, but had just 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Maybe at some point in his NFL career, could be soon. He could do stuff that makes him worthy of all of the praise that he is getting from the broadcast crews and national media. He hasn't done it yet. And Jonas, I don't know if you had an ear to the broadcast at all while you were watching this game in Minnesota, but boy, they were hyping up 9. It was just a ton of talk about how different and locked in he is. And I'll tell you what, I didn't see it at all.
Are there other players besides Gilbert Arenas, aka Agent Zero, whose number is their nickname or half of their nickname? I'm sure I'm blanking on some various like CP3. I guess that's a cool nickname. 9, besides just the alter ego that it speaks to, it's very lackluster is what I'll say. I don't want to make this. I don't want this to turn into 20 minutes of us bashing JJ McCarthy, even though that would probably be underserving what exactly he did in this game today. But just everything about him just leaves me deep eye roll emoji.
Yeah, I mean, and look, he could be good soon. I mean, this was his 4th career start.
Yep.
He's 22 years old. He won a national championship at Michigan. He could be good eventually. He has, I think, still a very good offensive head coach in Kevin O'Connell. So I think he will develop and continue to get better. But he missed a lot of passes today. Those 2 interceptions were ill-advised. The first one he throws into double coverage when he steps up and avoids the blitz, and I think it was 3rd and 7, and could have just basically walked for a first down, and instead heaves it deep. And Malachi Starks is the beneficiary and picks off his second pass as a pro. The other one was a little bit more understandable because you had one-on-one coverage downfield with Justin Jefferson, and Justin Jefferson looks like he just got his feet tangled with Marlon Humphrey, and Marlon Humphrey gets his first interception of the season. But there's a lot of forcing the ball to Justin Jefferson. There's not a whole lot of anticipation. I just the Ravens were on the right side of a not so great quarterback performance in this game, but they still deserve a lot of credit for forcing those 2 interceptions. They did allow Jalen Nailor to go off. I mean, Jalen Nailor had over 120 yards, 124 yards, amazingly. We came into this game talking about Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, and they combined for 70 yards on 7 catches, but Jalen Nailor burns them for some reason. But still, the Ravens defense overall played very well against this Vikings defense.
Yeah. Overall, McCarthy completed less than 50% of his passes, and looking at the RBSDM.com, runbacksdon'tmatter.com analytics, they had him as almost 12 percentage points below expectations. So based on just the kind of down distances and where he was throwing the ball, he wildly underperformed the kind of baseline expectations. Interestingly, Lamar was even further down. He was minus 13.5 completion points of completion percentage below expectation, which is kind of weird because
he missed some throws.
Yeah, but like 13 and a half points worth. I don't know. That was a little bit surprising. I asked John post game if they did anything special with Justin Jefferson, because obviously he hasn't been with JJ McCarthy back there. I think the only 2 or 3 performances of his year thus far with over 100 receiving yards were surprisingly with Carson Wentz. And so it's not really too far out of character for this partnership to not be as bountiful, to be as, to be bountiful in the ways that it wasn't today. But, John just said basically he gave a lot of credit to the guys. Like he said, the Ravens played a lot of one high. So that meant that you would end up with coverage playing out in man coverage type ways, whether it was actual man-to-man or was, a zone match type thing where you're sticking with your guy. He said they, rolled their coverage a couple times to Justin Jefferson out of quarters or out of other too high coverage rotations where you maybe had the outside cornerback, the cornerback opposite Jefferson with outside leverage, and you have the safety playing the inside so that you have kind of this 1.5 to double team type look with him that would kind of discourage some of those opportunities. Obviously, that didn't really discourage the sheer volume of targets that Justin Jefferson got, but that still means that there should have been other opportunities for Jordan Addison, and he really didn't do anything until that fourth quarter with that nice catch over the middle. So, obviously the Ravens would love to not have allowed over 100 yards to Nailor, but half of that came, or close to half of that came on that really, really nice throw that JJ McCarthy did complete in the first quarter when, Marlon Humphrey kind of got knocked off his route a little bit on that rub route from the slot, where it was just a really nice play. And, Marlon probably should have been in better coverage, but it was just I think a tip your cap kind of play, a tip your cap kind of route. But other than that, besides the kind of late fourth quarter touchdown drive, this Vikings offense had some opportunities to work with short fields or decent field positioning, and they couldn't really do a whole lot. So I still am underwhelmed by this pass rush, and I don't think a whole lot is going to change. But at least you did see some plays where Draymond Jones was able to make a difference, either coming off the edge or doing some pass rush games as an interior rusher.
Yeah, two QB hits for Draymond Jones in his Ravens debut. He also had a nice pressure on that third down that forced an errant throw by JJ McCarthy on the last drive of the first half for the Minnesota Vikings. So you were seeing a little bit of Draymond Jones' impact, and I think it'll continue to increase as he gets more snaps and gets more familiar and comfortable in this defense. But just 1 sack for 3 yards. Travis Jones had that 1 sack. He also had 2 batted passes, by the way. Yeah. So good stuff from Travis Jones. But I was very surprised that Carl Lawson was not elevated from the practice squad. in this game, and that David Ojabo was still out there getting a healthy dosage of snaps. Were you surprised by that too, Jonas?
Yep. Yeah, I was. I didn't think that we would see Ajabo in this game or maybe for the rest of the season, but obviously they need to continue to ramp up Ajabo, or they just wanted to hold off on the amount of elevations for that they didn't want to start the clock on those practice squad elevations for Carl Lawson as soon as today, because obviously you got 3, then you have to bring them to the 53-man roster, unless of course someone signs them off your practice squad. So it was definitely a surprise that we did not see Carl Lawson called up for this game. I think they could have used him a couple times. I don't know what kind of edge setter he is in the run game at this point, but it seemed like a lot of the Vikings' best runs were coming off tackle, where that the guy who was responsible for holding the edge was kind of getting washed down, and boom, there goes Aaron Jones into the second level. And fortunately, the Ravens were able to tackle there pretty well and didn't allow a whole lot of explosive gains after those Vikings running backs had broken through to the second level. But it could have been a lot worse in a lot of respects. And just looking at the stats right now, I wonder how close the Ravens came to a team record with the amount of passes defended, because it seemed like every other guy on this team had at least one, if not 2.
Yeah. Nate Wiggins had 1. Marlon Humphrey had 1. Malachi Starks had 1. Travis Jones had 2. Alohi Gilman had 1. I think he was credited for 1 in the end zone on what would have been a touchdown to, I believe, Justin Jefferson. Alohi Gilman just continues to show his value on this football team. Kyle Van Noy had 1. CJ Okoye knocked down a pass. John Jenkins had 1. Kyle Hamilton had 2. Chidobe Awuzie had 1. I mean, they were batting the ball down. Well. Roquan had 1 as well, and Roquan almost had his first interception of the season, diving and rolling over on the ball that was not. But boy, I mean, getting flashbacks to the Week 1 loss in Buffalo with the way that the Vikings came down the field and convert those 2 fourth downs, score the touchdown. The Ravens almost get like a game-sealing interception from Roquan Smith, and somehow the Vikings score and make it a 1-possession game. And it's happened just too many times this season where everybody's just sitting watching this game thinking it's going to happen again, isn't it? And they pulled it out, but just too close for comfort at too many different instances this season.
Yeah, I mean, just a high volume of plays in general. Like the Ravens ran 66, the Vikings ran 61. There are certain guys on this team who are probably a little bit overextended. I talked to Pat Ricard post game, and he kind of took a deep exhale when I asked him if he was available to talk, because he just said that he was sore because this was the first time that he played this number of snaps, whatever it was, since coming back from that calf injury. So just something to keep in mind of guys who either haven't been that active or who just haven't been active at all, and just ramping up to the game speed and the physicality of everything. It's not like riding a bike. It really does take a lot of acclimation and adjusting to get yourself into a position where you cannot feel like complete shit after a game.
Yep. On that note, we are going to take a quick break. Then we're going to look ahead to the playoff picture and what the Ravens need to do to try to make a run at the playoffs.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time. All right, so the Ravens are 4-5. They are looking at a pretty soft next couple weeks at Cleveland and home against the Jets, and then home on Thanksgiving against the Cincinnati Bengals before a massive matchup at home against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers are still 5-3. They play the LA Chargers on Sunday Night Football. Cincinnati, who came into this week tied with the Ravens in the division, have a bye. So Ravens look at those next 4 games, Jonas. At Cleveland, home against the Jets, Bengals, Steelers. Ravens need to win 3 of those 4 at least.
Yeah, I mean, it really is impossible to overstate how important that Steelers game is. I mean, just playing around on the New York Times playoff calculator, like if the Ravens win these next 3 games, they only go up to 76% chance to make the playoffs. So we're talking like 12% gain, because I think they're at 64% right now after the win today. But then if they beat the Steelers, they're up to 87%. If they lose to the Steelers, they're back under 50% at 48%. So Captain Obvious here checking in right now, but so much of their playoff hopes, so much of the playoff tiebreakers come down to just how they fare against Pittsburgh. Obviously, it's still a month away, so we don't want to put the cart before the horse. But just for the fact that the Ravens are now, again, solid favorites to make the playoffs, it sounds like, just looking at what all these models have. But so much of this projections are, I guess that they probably have the Ravens as slight favorites over the Steelers. I think they had it as slight favorites coming in, at least on the New York Times. I think they were lower on ESPN and on FTN as well. Obviously, how the Chargers do against the Steelers tonight is probably going to have a big impact on just how these teams are seen in the computer models, and of course where they are in the standings. But it just all feels like 3 weeks of foreplay before it gets to Ravens Steelers.
Yeah, but the Ravens just can't overlook the next few teams on their schedule. We know that they have had some ugly, ill-timed losses to lesser teams over the last couple of years.
Yeah,
just can't let that happen against the Jets or Browns.
This is what we talked about and what I wrote about before the season kicked off as part of that John Harbaugh-led effort to just drill down on the small things and everything that they were doing with the leaderboards in the position rooms and charting everything in training camp. It's like, yes, the Ravens have been one of the most successful regular season teams in recent memory, but FTN has this stat called variance, which is basically like how consistent to your general week-to-week production are you being on a week-to-week basis. And sometimes you have extreme positive variance, like you go and you see the Ravens just kick the ever-living crap out of the Broncos after Denver came into Baltimore last year, looking like they had a defense that could absolutely hang with the Ravens. But then you also have the negative variance where the Ravens drop a game to Jameis Winston and the Browns as close to double-digit favorites or whatever they were. So yeah, it's a great point. Like if the Ravens can't afford negative variance over these next 3 weeks, because you just have not given yourself that kind of wiggle room with the first half of your season or the first third of your season. And it's going to be a big test of this team's depth, this team's leadership, this team's execution in offense, defense, and special teams to not drop the ball in any of those 3 games, because that is going to completely change the mood and how we think about this Ravens team. Like if you can't take care of the Bengals and Joe Flacco, I forget, is that first game against Cincinnati at home or in Cincinnati?
It's at home.
Yeah, because it's the Thanksgiving
the Thursday night,
right?
Yeah, Thanksgiving game.
Like
yeah.
If you can't be trusted to win a Thanksgiving game, primetime game against who we think will be Joe Flacco and the Bengals, then how could we possibly trust you to beat the Broncos in the wild card round or the Bills in the wild card round? And it's just one of those things. But you have to be happy with the wins that you get. Obviously, Bills fans right now are feeling just a special type of agony right now, and seeing Miami, who just like the Bills have had their number basically ever since Josh Allen got to Buffalo. This is a shit happens to kind of league, but the Ravens cannot afford to let shit happen. That's the hole that you dig for yourself when you start 1-5.
I think the area of variance that has swung the Ravens' way the last few weeks, health. Marlon Humphrey had an interception today, by the way, despite dealing with a finger thing, John Harbaugh said after this game, that we did not know about. Other than that, on this Ravens team left this game with injury. They are remarkably healthy as they look to go on a run here.
Yeah, Jay Higgins, the inside linebacker, another of those undrafted rookies, looked like he might have been pretty banged up. I think he apparently walked out of the locker room in a knee brace or some kind of knee situation. So he could be out for the foreseeable future, which is obviously a shame considering just how much of a fan favorite he was and the kind of pop that he's given the Ravens on special teams. But, like I wrote about, I think before the game against Miami, this was a prime spot, and this prime spot will continue into next week of going against literally some of the most turnover-prone quarterbacks in the NFL, like Tua, turnover-prone, JJ McCarthy, turnover prone. Dylan Gabriel, turnover prone. And what have the Ravens done? They've, after having four turnovers total over the first 6 weeks, I think they have 6 turnovers total over these past 2 games, both wins. At a certain point, that luck is going to run out, and the Ravens' offense's bad luck is probably going to start to ebb in the wrong direction, the right direction, however you want to call it. But they've done what they've had to, and they've taken advantage of these quarterbacks who can do dumb things, and they've helped them do dumb things.
Yeah, that's all you need to do. It doesn't really matter at this point how pretty it is. Just get to the necessary 500 next week, then push yourself over 500, and it's really going to matter when you start playing Pittsburgh. But just rack up wins at this point. Ravens have 3 wins in a row now, looking to get their 4th next week against the Cleveland Browns. We will have complete coverage on thebanner.com, or you can subscribe at $1 for 6 months.
Shout out to the Banner.
Jonas Shaffer, Gianna Hahn, Kyle Goon, all have great stuff for you. Childs Walker as well. All good stuff coming your way. And on Thursday, Jonas and I will be back with another podcast as well. At Jonas_Shaffer is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Write us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and I will read it out here on the show.